Hello everyone, my name is Hannah. Welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to talk about all of the books that I read in February. So I managed to read 16 books in February. I DNF'd one book and then I'm in the middle of another book. So 18 if you want to count those, even though I didn't finish the one book that I DNF'd and I haven't finished the book that I'm in the middle of. But I did read fully 16 books. So the book that I started off the month with was King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair. This is the same author as the Touch of Darkness series, or A Touch of Darkness. And this was Jody's Patreon book club pick for January, and I didn't get to it in January, but I still wanted to read it because it still sounded really interesting. And I really loved this one. It is like a vampire fantasy romance. So this princess, Isolde, I think is how you say it. She has to marry this vampire king in order to help save her kingdom, and she hates vampires, but there's some kind of connection between them, so that she definitely has a physical attraction to him, and the story basically takes off from there. It's really, really good. I feel like if you liked the From Blood and Ash series, you would really like this one because there's a ton of similarities between these ones. And I know the second book for this comes out later this year. I know the cover reveal is coming out like tomorrow after I'm filming this, so I'm really excited to see what the cover is going to look like, and I'm definitely going to be picking that one when it comes out. But yeah, this was a super fun time. I really enjoyed reading it. I was in a little bit of a reading slump when I picked this up, so I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it. So I'm like, I just need to get into a story and read a couple chapters, and so I picked it up and then I read for like 100 pages because I didn't want to stop. It was that good. And I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. Then the next book that I picked up was A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. I have been meaning to get to this one for a very long time, and I figured now is finally the time to get to it. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but the girl is from like modern time Washington DC, and there's like an alternate universe where the prince has been cursed, and so his like guardsman is able to cross between the two worlds to try to find a girl for him to fall in love with to break the curse. And our main character Harper sees the guardsman trying to like take this girl, and so she decides to go over there and try to stop it, and he ends up having to take her instead, and so she's trapped in this other world. And I just really liked Harper. I loved her. She was so like witty and snarky, and her attitude was just so funny to read from. She also has cerebral palsy, so that is an added thing to this, but it just proved that she's just so much more than what her disability is, because she's just such an amazing character. And this one was just a super fun one to read. It was a really, really quick read, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. So since we just talked about A Curse So Dark and Lonely, I might as well say that I did pick up A Heart So Fierce and Broken later in the month, and I didn't like this one as much. This is the book that I DNF'd. I got halfway through. I was at like page 234, so this far into it. And I just didn't care about anything that was happening. I didn't care about the characters at all. I felt like nothing happened in those 200 pages. This book follows different characters from the first book, so the main reason why I liked A Curse So Dark and Lonely so much was because of Harper, and she's barely in this one. We follow a side character who I think has the personality of a wet napkin, and he's really boring, and like I don't care. I don't care about him at all. And I feel like the people that did really like this one really liked that character, and I just don't care about him, so it was really annoying to read from his point of view. I got halfway through and I was literally just getting like annoyed having to pick this up, so I'm like, I'm just gonna DNF it. I'm not gonna enjoy this, so what's the point? I'm just gonna keep A Curse So Dark and Lonely kind of as a standalone in my head, or make up whatever ending I want. But yeah, I didn't really care about this one, so this was the one that I DNF'd later in the month. Then I did a 24-hour readathon with my friends Jan and Sarah from Jan Agaton and Sarah's Shelves, and it was super, super fun. I did a vlog for it, so if you haven't seen that yet, I'll link it in the cards up above. But the first book that I picked up for that one was Vespertine by Margaret Rogerson. This is the one that I mainly focused on in that reading vlog, and in the end, I did like this one. It just wasn't anything too amazing. I really liked Sorcery of Thorns when I read that one a couple years ago, and I feel like if I would have picked this one up right after reading that, I would have liked it more, but I did enjoy it. It was a good time, but it wasn't like anything super amazing or anything like that. Like, I'm glad that I read it, but will I ever reread it? Probably not. So I ended up giving this one a 3-star. Oh, if I didn't say what this one is about, this girl, I forgot her name already. Artemisia. How do you forget a name like that? She is training to be a Grey Sister, which is like this convent of women who kind of protect the souls of the dead, and their convent ends up getting attacked by these possessed soldiers, and in order to defend the convent, she has to awaken this spirit, like this revenant thing, and then it kind of like inhabits her body, so she's like sharing her brain with this other thing, and then they've got to go like figure out what's going on. So it's a lot of mystery, it's a lot of like spirit world talk. There was a whole hierarchy of spirits at the very end here. Let me show it to you. So I really thought that that was very interesting, all the different types of spirits and like how they become that way. But yeah, this was just a 3-star. And then for that same 24-hour readathon, I picked up volume 7 and volume 8 of Giant Days because they're graphic novels. It's 24-hour readathon. They're really quick to get through, and I love them so much. They're just such a fun time. Volume 7 has some of my favorite like comic panels in it, and they're just so relatable, and I loved it so much. So I gave this one 5 stars on my reread. The first time I read it, I think I only gave it 4 stars, but I was just laughing and smiling so much during this that I couldn't not give it 5 stars. And then I gave volume 8 4 stars, and every time I read these, I most of the time give the volumes 4 stars, but the series as a whole is 5 stars for me. It's so wholesome and comforting and hilarious, and I just love them so much. So I'm really glad that I was able to pick these 2 up for that readathon. The next book I picked up was The New Wilderness by Diane Cook. This is a near future kind of dystopian where humans have built up too many buildings, and so there's like no wilderness left. Most animals are extinct, and there's this one area, this one state that still has like the wilderness. And this group of people go into this wilderness where it's forbidden for humans to go, but they have this experiment that they're doing to see if humans can survive without destroying the environment. And it's basically them just like in this small group of like 20 people trying to survive without pretty much anything. Like they're just supposed to be nomadic and they're supposed to move around. And it mainly follows this woman, B, who is kind of the unofficial leader of this group. And it also follows her daughter Agnes, who was about 5 when they went into the wilderness. The reason they went was because Agnes was basically dying from all of the smog and the impure air that they were having to breathe in the city. And so they got to do this experiment, and they went to the wilderness. And so she's like mainly grown up in the wilderness. Like that's all she knows. And it was just a really interesting take on what would happen if there was hardly any wilderness left. In the end, I ended up giving this a 4-star, but after sitting with it for a little bit, I think I would realistically give it more of a 3-star because it was just okay. Then I started my reread of House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. I started this because the second book came out this month and I wanted to have this story fresh in my head. I had never reread this book before. I've only read it the one time when it came out, and so I had forgotten a lot of what happened. Like I knew the main plot points, but I still wanted to be in the story and fresh in the story for the second one. And my reread was so much fun. I loved this book so much, and I obviously gave it 5 stars. And then when the release of the second book, House of Sky and Breath, came out, I read it all in one day. I did a whole reading vlog specifically for this book, and it's full of spoilers and everything, but I had such a fun time reading this, and I love this series. I love Sarah J. Maas's writing. I love her characters, her worlds. I love everything about both of these books, and I immediately after finishing this, I was desperate for the third book. Like, I don't even know what to say. I just love these characters so much. So basically the first book is about this girl, Bryce. It's an urban fantasy, like high fae, vampires, fallen angels, mermaids, like all kinds of fantastical creatures live in this world. Something very tragic happens to the main character right at the beginning of the book, and she kind of tries to help solve this mystery of what happened. And that's really all I'm going to say about it. I just feel like if you are in the mood for kind of an urban fantasy, or if you're just a Sarah J. Maas fan and you haven't read this one yet, highly recommend it. Both of these are just so good. And the story is it's really picking up in the second book. So if you haven't read the Crescent City series yet, you definitely should. 5 stars for both of these, if I didn't say that. So then after I read House of Sky and Breath, I kind of didn't know what to do with myself. I just really wanted to stay in that world. But I still also wanted to kind of push forward and not let myself get into a reading slump just because of that book. So I decided to pick up A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. So this was my book of the month pick for February. It was the only fantasy option, and I saw on Goodreads it said House of Earth and Blood meets some other book. And so I was like, okay, that'll be like the perfect thing, because if it's got similarities, then I want to read it. I don't know where they got that comparison from. I really don't. I have no idea. I went in with those expectations then, thinking that there was going to be some kind of similarity between House of Earth and Blood and this book, and there's literally not, and I feel like that is why I ended up being pretty disappointed by this. It's about this little island called Cadence, and this guy Jack used to live in Cadence, but he went to go study music at a university off the island, and the island itself is like pretty magical, and there's all these spirits and stuff that kind of surround the island, and their 2 sides of the island are kind of hate each other. They're at like an impasse now. It's not a war per se, but they're not allowed to go to the other side of the island, and both sides of the island need the other side. Like, they need something from the other side in order to survive. They're slowly starting to realize that. And then at the same time, one side of the island, I think it's the east side of the island, they have like these little girls go missing. And so this guy comes back, he gets called back by like the ruler of the east side. And basically you try to solve like what's going on and why these girls are going missing. But yeah, I just thought that this was like kind of boring, even though there was that mystery. Like, I don't know, it just jumped around in the POVs, and I just didn't really care about a lot of what was going on. At first I thought I was gonna like it because there's a little bit of an enemies to lovers aspect to it, but it was kind of rushed, to be honest, and I feel like if it was just those 2 characters that it followed, maybe it would have been more interesting, because I liked the scenes where they were like together, but it wasn't. So I ended up giving this a 2.5 stars because it was getting kind of tedious at the end, and it felt very long. I feel like it didn't need to be this long, and apparently there's going to be a sequel to it. I don't know. I just got really bored with this one, so 2.5. Then I did another 24-hour readathon with my friend Ashley, so I did another vlog for that. So if you want to watch my more in-depth thoughts or watching me read these books that I read for that, you certainly can. I'll leave it linked up in the cards above. But the first book that I decided to pick up for that was These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I got this from Book of the Month. Originally, I didn't have very much interest in reading this. It's a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in 1920s Shanghai, and I don't know, I'm not a big fan of Romeo and Juliet. Like, I don't really care about the play at all. I just think the line of These Violent Delights, like, that they put, of course, in the very beginning of the book, these violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph die like fire and powder, which as they kiss consume. That's a great line, but the play as a whole, I don't really care about. So I didn't have very much interest in this, but I saw Brittany from Brittany the Bibliophile really liked this one. And so I feel like we had pretty similar reading tastes, and so I wanted to give it a shot, and I did not end up liking this one. I could kind of tell by the first like 100 pages that I wasn't really enjoying it, but I just thought maybe it would pick up more. It was another case of like the 2 main characters, Roma and Juliet, like if they were together a lot more, then I don't know. I just didn't care about the mystery aspect of it. I thought it was pretty predictable too. By the end, I like predicted a lot of what was going to happen, and I don't know. I found the characters very annoying. I did not end up liking this one very much at all. I gave it 2 stars. Just not for me, and I will not be continuing on with the series. Then the next book I picked up for that 24-hour readathon was These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan. This is pitched as The Cruel Prince meets ACOTAR, and I can totally see the comparisons for those. So like in A River Enchanted, couldn't see the comparison at all. Don't get where they got that from. But with this one, like, yeah, that's exactly how I would describe it. It's like got the fairyland aspect of The Cruel Prince, but also with the somewhat love triangle between these like fae people. like one good guy, one kind of darker guy. You kind of don't know who you can trust. And the beginning I thought was a little scattered. Like I don't know. I didn't get into the beginning very much. I just was like, this feels super YA. It feels like the writing was just not precise enough for what I wanted. But then once I got to the halfway point, I just didn't want to stop reading it. It was so good, and I really, really liked where the story went. And so I'm definitely going to be picking up the second book, which comes out this summer sometime, These Twisted Bonds, I think it's called. But yeah, I really, really ended up liking this. Like I said, the first 100 or so pages, I was kind of like, ooh, I'm not sure if this is for me. But then once you actually get to Fairy, it gets so much better. And the story becomes like much clearer. It's not so scattered and all over the place and like feeling very rushed. I thought it was just done really well after the halfway point. I did really like this one. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I decided to pick up the Mindf series. So I joined Gabby from Gabby Reads Patreon reading sprints. Were they Patreon reading sprints or were they just regular sprints? Now I don't remember. But Mique was on there, Mique from Mique's book vlogs, and he had brought up that series, and so they were all kind of talking about it. And I was like, you know what? I've seen people read that series. It has very risque covers, so I wasn't sure what to expect. Like, it seems like it would just be like a really steamy, dark romance, but that is not what the series is at all. And no shade to that either. Like, I would totally read that. It's just not what I was in the mood for at the time, so I was kind of putting it off. But the way Mique described it, and he was like, the romance kind of takes the back seat a little bit to the main plot of the book. So basically, I'm going to hold it up now. I bought the omnibus of it. So this is all 5 books, okay? So they're like between 100 and 150 pages. The very last one is a little bit longer. It's like 175 pages. But they're really short books. So like this is 5 books. And so this is the whole series in paperback, like in an omnibus. But I read all of them on my Kindle, on my iPad, on my Kindle app. And yeah, I just decided to give the first book a shot. It follows a serial killer who's like a female Dexter. So she's killing these like terrible men. And she ends up meeting and falling for an FBI agent who is the lead FBI profiler on her case, which she doesn't know at the time, but they end up falling for each other. And it is very much a revenge story with a little dash of romance. Like, I was reading this for the revenge story. I was here for it. I did enjoy the romance, but I would say that that's not the reason to read this series. The revenge story is so good and the plot is just so good. And I just really liked the main character, Lena. I thought she was hilarious and so much fun to read from her point of view. So you flip between her point of view and the FBI agent's point of view. And so if you like Criminal Minds, where they like profile serial killers, there's a lot of that in Logan's perspective, which is also fun to read about. It's very fascinating, I think. But yeah, I read the first one and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. The next day I picked up books 2 and 3, which I loved both of them, gave them 5 stars. And then the next day I picked up books 4 and 5, which I loved them, and I gave them 5 stars. So as a whole, the series is fantastic, and I am putting this on my list of favorite books of 2022 because it was just, it's so good. But definite trigger warnings for like brutal and graphic rape scenes, torture scenes, and murder scenes. Plus there's other triggers as well, so look those up before you read this one. But absolutely love this. 5 out of 5 for sure. A new favorite. And then the book that I am in the middle of reading is my reread of A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. Currently, I am on page 145. So there's still 1 day left of the month. Like, I still have today, the rest of today, and tomorrow to try to get farther in this. But I know I won't finish it in that time, so I figured I'd just mention it. I'm sure I'll finish it in March. But I'm enjoying my reread, and I'm just taking my time with it, and yeah, you know how I feel about this book. I love this book, so you know it's going to be a 5 out of 5, regardless of when I finish it. All right, let's try to get a stack here. That's all right. It's just these Violent Delights. All right. Get my hair behind me here so it doesn't get caught in the books like it's been doing the whole video. Here are all of the books that I read in February. Oh my gosh, this is a heavy stack. How am I gonna do this thumbnail? So yes, really, really enjoyable reading month overall. I dropped everything. Well, that's okay. No books were harmed in that catastrophe. This month I read two of my favorite books of the year, House of Sky and Breath and the Mindf series. These are so good. So I would say that's a pretty good reading month, even though I had my first DNF of the year and a book that I should have DNF'd but didn't. Overall, it was still a pretty good reading month. So if you made it to the end of this video, I would say either leave the crescent moon emoji or the apple emoji, whichever one you're feeling. Fantasy or graphic, dark revenge story. You tell me. You tell me in the comments down below. So thank you again so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button. It really helps me out and supports my channel. And I will see you all in my next video. Bye!